Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Common Sense in an Uncommon World. And Mike, what a week it has been. We've got Kristi Noem. You've got President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that he was replacing Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, with Senator Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma.
Yay. I think Mark Wayne is a good dog person. So it's a step up.
Well, the other thing too that I saw on this senator is he used to be an MMA fighter.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and he leads. I think he leads the Capitol like their 6:30 a.m. workouts every single day.
he looks it.
Yeah. This guy's like
he's also the guy. I forget who it was, but it was some union guy that was testifying before his committee. Huh?
Teamsters. The Teamsters. Yeah.
Yeah. He was ready to take it outside, and Bernie Sanders had to jump in and play peacemaker, which says all you need to know right there. But yeah, it's, Kristi Noem was the first one to fall. It took a year and 3 months or 2 months for it to happen. Big difference from Trump 1. Trump 1 was almost immediate turmoil, and changing the national security advisor literally within months after the person was in, and then significant changes on staff at the West Wing, significant changes in staff in the cabinet, in major positions, and this time it's been a lot more stable in terms of corrections being made. Certainly, Noem is not the only one that has had issues. Some of the others have had issues, but you've seen the White House step in and make corrections in those agencies so that there's stability, but more control and discipline coming from the West Wing than there was in the first administration. But I watched her testimony both in front of the House committee and the Senate committee, and I just did, at the end of it, after 4 bowls of popcorn, it was like, how does this person survive this? Especially when she basically threw Donald Trump under the bus. That was probably the biggest mistake. Well, that wasn't the biggest mistake she's made, but that was the most deadly mistake she made.
Well, in going with the question, the comment you made of throwing Donald Trump under the bus, the senator from Louisiana, Republican Senator John Kennedy. Yeah. He didn't go easy on her during the questioning before the Judiciary Committee. The Louisiana Republican, peppered Noem with some tough questions about the agency spending $220 million in ads on advertising campaign that promptly, showcased her.
Mm-hmm.
He basically asked, did Trump approve this spending? And her answer was yes. And her version and the president's version, of what happened was very different.
Right.
Kennedy noted, that was a very different. That the president had not indicated that he had approved of this spending.
Well, I saw Senator Kennedy on TV, and he was asked a question by a reporter, and it was interesting because, he's not the most favorite person of President Trump. In fact, I think he has a primary against him in Louisiana. He's running for re-election. But what happened was Senator Kennedy said, well, I wasn't going to betray confidences of the conversation I had with President Trump, but he was mad as a murder hornet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, and his questioning, the thing I liked, the thing that was good about his questioning is it was very factual, direct. It wasn't like the hyperbole of, I saw Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island holding up a picture of the bedroom in the 737. It wasn't that kind of salacious thing. It was about the use of taxpayer dollars, the fact that she said that there was a competitive bid when in fact it wasn't a competitive bid, the fact that the company that got the award had not existed 7 days before the award was given. The fact that she said the president had approved of it. all of those things, and the fact that the people that did it also were tied to Corey Lewandowski, all of those things, just created a firestorm where there already was a bigger firestorm in terms of what had happened in Minnesota with 2 people getting killed, and what had happened repeatedly with making statements as if they were fact before you had all of the facts, which you never do. At least you don't do if you're responsible. And so, and then, the final one being the president said it was fine when the president didn't say it was fine. It's it was almost, I don't know how she would have survived all of that. So instead she becomes the liaison or for the American Shield or whatever, security shield for the Western Hemisphere. I did some research on it, and ironically enough, they have a big event this weekend in Miami, and it's all the governments from the Latin countries of the Western Hemisphere, and it's like, wow, what a perfect person to.
Yeah.
It's like, let me go talk to these people. And by the way, I just took their grandmother out of California and shipped her back to Venezuela, on the plane or what have you. So it was time. I think it was, and again, the one thing I would say from a positive standpoint is this kind of stuff happened on a regular basis.
Correct.
In the first term. There will be changes going forward. There's no doubt about it. I don't know how many changes will happen between now and November of this year, but certainly after November of this year, when the president is not able to run for re-election, you'll see changes taking place at the cabinet level. But the stability of the cabinet and of the West Wing is so much different than it was last time, and I think honestly that serves the president better.
Well, in looking at some of the things you talked about. Yes, you've got the killing of the 2 individuals in Minnesota, and then she ended up labeling them as domestic terrorists. Then you had the White House bring in the border czar, Ton Homan, the deployment in Minnesota to help resolve issues associated with the massive surge of federal agents for immigration enforcement. But you also saw something else, that extended beyond immigration. It looked at one of the criticisms that I got to see online in a variety of places was that she had this huge tightening of grip on the department's purse strings, ordering that every contract and grant over $100,000 must cross her desk for approval. A move, basically, she basically said this was in order to cut down on waste, but it also led to kind of monetary relief for areas decimated by natural disasters that occurred this past summer, to kind of have delays in some of those things. And so there had been growing frustrations within that, not just the agency itself, but those people who were looking to get some of this money for relief.
There's a thing in communications, as you know, Hector, called cross pressure, where you say one thing, but the record says something else, or by saying one thing, it creates another issue. And what you just pointed out is exactly a cross pressure. She's testifying and she says, well, I didn't make that selection for this, $100 million, $140 million contract, whatever it was. It was somebody else that did it. I don't have any knowledge of this and everything else. Yet literally 5 minutes before that, in answering questions from Senator Booker, she was defending that policy you just said, which was she approved everything over $100,000. So whoever prepped her for that and said, okay, if they come at you with the cap thing, here's the answer, accountability, yada, yada, yada. And then when they got to the question during the prep time about how did this get approved and this amount of money and going to a company that's politically connected and wasn't in existence, the answer was, well, I didn't do that. That's a cross pressure that just blew up in their face. And it's one of those things that people, in this business need to be careful of, because what she said 5 minutes before contradicted exactly what she said in trying to defend the several $100 million media contract. And, it was just, I remember when I heard her answer that question, I was sitting and I said, but you just said that you've got the $100,000 cap because you want to keep a tight control, but now you don't know how this happened. It doesn't add up.
Right. And we'll see what other changes happen. And, usually a lot of these, you're probably going to get a lot more changes, especially after this November election, where there seems to kind of oftentimes in this normal process where you have a reshuffling of a lot of people within the cabinet and other people within the White House. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is, and we saw it started this week, what's going to be coming on a regular basis now, rolling forward, including in California, is the primaries. You had the Texas primary earlier this week, which was, I don't know if it was an MMA fight, they'd probably call it a draw. You got the Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn, who, I wouldn't say has been a huge MAGA person, but who has a couple of the president's political consultants working for him, barely eking out over the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. I think it was like 43-40, and because it's a runoff state, they have to go into a runoff because nobody got 50% of the vote, and the president hadn't up until now anyway taken a position on which one he favored, and so that's going to be one to watch. The Democrats, put forth Tallarico as opposed to Jasmine Crockett, which probably puts them more in the center lane than the far left lane. So it could be an interesting race, but the primaries have started as well, and so you'll start to see things like that happening, and you'll see signs here and there of how much the people's reaction to the current state of affairs in the country, as well as the power that the White House has in the Republican areas is going to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, let's change kind of subjects here. I want to talk about this absolutely just horrific controversy happening in California, and it blows my mind. I know for a lot of folks out there who look at California itself as just being this nutball place. I mean, this is exhibit number one here. So you had the ex-district attorney, Anne Marie Schubert. She ended up, basically has been talking about this crazy case along with the sheriff here in Sacramento. Now, mind you, the sheriff in Sacramento is a Democrat. Anne Marie Schubert is an independent. You've got a convicted child rapist by the name of David Allen Funston. He was convicted for raping 8 kids in 1995. He was convicted in 1995, lured them with candy and toys. This guy had 16 counts. Obviously, he's got 8 kids, 16 counts of kidnapping and child rape. The ages of these victims range from 3 to 7 years of age. He was sentenced to 95 years in prison. So he had 3 life sentences. He served 27, but because California changed the law, so here's how it went. In 2018, California changed its law to say at 60 years of age, you are considered an elder, a senior. And if you serve 20 continuous years of incarceration, you are eligible for parole. Well, that changed a couple years ago where they moved the age from 60 down to 50. And so now they've got the eligibility for parole at the age of 50 who has served 20 years of continuous incarceration. And so what this basically did is it allowed this individual to go by, the parole board, and the parole board basically said, yeah, we're gonna release you. And this angered as noted, the Sacramento County Sheriff, who was held a press conference. He was flanked by some of the victims and investigators who helped bring Funston to justice. He called reporters to their headquarters and to this press conference, and I mean his comments were like, I just can't believe that this is happening. You can't rehabilitate people like this guy. And what is going to happen to these victims, and what is going to happen when you allow this individual out. The Sacramento Superior Court judge, called this guy a monster that parents fear the most. But nonetheless, he was set to be released. And out of the rescue comes the neighboring county, Placer County, the district attorney. Right when he was about to be released, they filed a 1996 child molestation case against him. And so the reason they hadn't filed it before was, like they said, okay, this guy's got 3 life sentences. He's never going to be out. Why have the victim go through this all over again? The person is there, never going to come out. And so because Funson was about to be released, they filed it. And he is now in a Placer County jail, no bail, and just kind of had his arraignment this past week. And I mean, this is just the craziest thing. We've got California passed a law at 60 years of age, said now, let's make it at 50, goes to the parole board, gets released out. This law is signed by the governor. It's signed by the majority, which, the Democratic Party here in California signed it into law, then signed it by the governor, really made it into law. And everyone right now is pointing fingers at one another. The governor's saying, well, the parole board made this decision and they are independent. And you've got other folks who are in.
Who points to the parole board?
That's it. The crime victims, along with the bail agents and everyone else, saying the parole board serves basically for the governor. He gets to appoint them all. This governor, along with the previous governor, appointed every single one of them. He has the power to remove them. He has the power to reappoint them. And he has the power to pick up the phone and say, hey, what the hell are you doing? So that is the crazy mess that we're in right now. And it is not just this guy, but there are a few others that are ready to get released too, that are going through this process because they've served their continuous 20 years in prison or incarceration, and they're 50 years of age or older.
So just to recap, and that was a crazy story. I mean, anybody listening to it would think it was a fiction story, written for TV, but it's not, because it's a perfect example of the craziness of California. You have a parole board that was appointed by the governor. You have a law that says reduces the age for being a senior in California when it comes to crime to being 50, not 60, that I assume was signed by the governor.
Mm-hmm.
The word I wrote down on my piece of paper as you were describing all of this was Willie Horton.
Oh, yeah.
Here's Gavin Newsom's Willie Horton.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect example of finding someone who, has a terrific or horrific, not terrific, but a horrific criminal record. And the law changes because of policy by the governor, signed by the governor. The mechanism within the government to have it being abused is bypassed because of the people that the governor and thanks to the Placer County DA, this guy would be out on the street.
Yeah.
And all of that, what I just described in 30 seconds, would make for a devastating political ad against the governor should he decide to be the Democrat nominee for president in 2028. It's insane. The place is insane. It's one of those things that crosses. It's not even an ideological thing. I mean, first of all, look, here's a good rule of thumb, not to make light of it, but if you're a senior citizen at Denny's, it's 55. Okay, so even if you go to Denny's, it's 55 and you're considered a senior citizen. But if in California you're a criminal, it's 50. You're a senior citizen for this purpose. I mean, why would anyone come up with that kind of thing? Is the first thing you think of. The second thing you think of is, people that are for the most part getting those kinds of sentences are not people that have made one mistake. They're people that have a history of pathological and sociological incompetence and whatever. And so those people, there are just people that should not be in society, period. They don't have the ability to function in society. And this guy is clearly one of those people that does stuff like this. So it's one of those things that just defies the common sense and common sensibilities that people have. And it's one of those things that make people look. And I know the governor loves to run around the country saying, hey, look at us in California, look at us in California. And he can do that right now. And, people are focused on other things. But I'm telling you, if he ends up becoming the nominee or even becomes a front runner come 2028 for the Democrat Party, this kind of stuff is going to be hung around his head because it's effective. It crosses demographics. It crosses party, and it's easy to communicate to people and get a reaction from them because anyone, even though I wouldn't say even the liberalist of people because you never know, but for most people, what you just described is a horrific situation that should not be in existence and you shouldn't even have to talk about.
Yeah, and if I've had the opportunity to work with various crime victims, and this is when you read, there's a transcript of this particular case, and to kind of add more fuel to this is this guy had a hearing, and it was a hearing in 2021, and he talked about during this hearing he said he still had fantasies about kids. He talked about having a fantasy about an 8-year-old girl that lived across the street and played with his daughter. He also, he admitted to molesting a boy because of the desire for power and control. He described, there's that he even described it. There's always a possibility that he'd relapse. That it wasn't inevitable that he would relapse. And even during all that testimony, the parole board, the governor's office, and everyone else involved thought it to be okay to say, you know what, let's let him out. This guy in his van would lure kids with toys and dolls and stuff to get them in the van and molest them and rape them. And it is these kind of monsters that you're right on the description of the Willie Horton case for Gavin. But at the same time, what's the message we send out to parents? What's the message we send out to the community saying, hey, it is the criminals over the families, over the victims, that we care more about them and letting them out than we do about protecting these kids. We do protecting our communities. And it is, and in this particular case, you've had Republicans, Democrats, independents who are just shaking their head as to what is happening. But those that signed this particular piece of legislation into law, including the governor, are out there pointing fingers on everyone else. And it's an insanity what's going on.
Well, they can point all they want. It's question one, who voted for who introduced, who co-signed, co-sponsored the bill, who voted for the bill. Question two, who are the people that serve on the parole board and who put them in their position. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. So, that's what's, it's just, and you brought out a good point. They come up with all kinds of reasons not to do things that would help families, that would help kids, that would help taxpayers, but they have no compunction about voting for something like this. And I think part of it is sometimes they don't even think through what they're voting on. It's just crazy. It's just crazy.
Well, they do. I think they do. One thing I'm going to disagree with you on is I think they do it in the sense of I think they know what they're voting on because you hear them in the committee hearings and say, it needs to be all about rehabilitation. It needs to be, we have too many people in our prisons and in our jails. There has been a movement to close down our jails. We have closed down 2 already. I think we're ready to shut down another prison. And what happens is when you move them from prisons, you move them to jails, which are now overcrowded. And so then what do? They pass laws to say, okay, crimes over a certain amount, we're basically not, we're just going to give you a fix-it ticket. And at the same time, then the judges know already that, hey, our jails are so full, so I'm going to give you reduced sentences. And, hey, Mike, don't do this again. And then you're out back again. And so what we have now, especially in our jails, is kind of this revolving door. And I honestly believe that they do this on purpose because in their heads, they believe that it is a system that is, because I've heard them talk about it, an inherently racist system that only goes and after certain types of individuals, and that everyone deserves a second chance. And I believe in second chances, but man, when you get to 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, or any types of crimes like this, you don't deserve a second chance.
No, I mean, and the whole logic of them trying to explain it that, I mean, this isn't some guy that goes into CVS 5 times and steals a bunch of, right, women's cosmetics and then sells it online. This isn't that. I mean, that, a person that does that should get jail time. I mean, it's against the law, then you should get jail time. But this isn't that. And this isn't even, someone that goes out and, robs a bank because, and they come back and they say, well, I robbed the bank because, I got a kid at home and I got to pay for the diapers or whatever the excuse they come up with that, still is not acceptable. There are monsters in society. And they should be monsters in society, treated as monsters in society, whether they break the law in California, or they break the law in Alabama, or they break the law in New York. They should be treated as the monsters they are.
Yeah.
With a record that this guy has, he's a monster. And anybody in a position of authority, whether it's legislative or executive, that allows the door to be open to someone like this should not be in elected office. They should be nowhere near anything of responsibility that has to do with the safety of the public, of the community, and especially the kids of the community.
Well said, Mike. Well, Mike, we've got one other topic I know we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
Today is Friday, March 6th, and we've got one Democrat out, and 8 major Democrats have filed paperwork to run for governor of California. And so the one that decided to step down a couple of days ago was Ian Calderon, who was state assembly member, decided to run for governor, but he has now since stepped down, and he's endorsed Eric Swalwell. And so now that leaves 8 Democrats will appear, 8 major Democrats will appear on the California ballot for governor, and 2 major Republicans. And so the odds makers now have it that there's a 27% chance that we may have 2 Republicans in the runoff. I still don't believe that to be true, because the unions, the Dems, they will do whatever they can to try to propel one of their folks over or try to knock someone else down. And so, there's still quite a bit of time till June, as you know, and that's where we are here in California.
Well, I guess the first question someone should ask the 8 Democrats that are left standing is, so, how old do how do you feel about some 50-year-old pervert, who probably should be getting the electric chair being set loose on the street because your Democrat legislature in California and your Democrat governor have set up a system that allows this guy to go back on the street? That's the first question every one of those 8 should be asked. Not, how do you feel about drilling for oil? How do you feel about letting a child molester loose on the street? And then maybe that's what they should have done, and then they would have had a couple or 3 of those more drop before today. Because I don't know how they, especially those that have been in positions of authority, I don't know how they're gonna answer to something like that. But I just think that I agree with you. By the way, I don't know who the odds makers are. They're saying that there's a 28% chance of 2 Republicans ending up running against each other. If we've learned anything in the last 13, 14 months, it's anything can happen. But I don't even think that can happen.
Yeah.
Even though, we're taking over Greenland, we're at war with Canada and everything else. This 2 Republicans running against each other in California, I don't see happening. I wouldn't mind it, but I don't see it happening. But the other part that's worth mentioning is, you have people that are running. California is a unique state that have huge pockets, and so that's really what it comes down to, is who has enough resources to frame the narrative the way they want it to be framed, and who has, as you pointed out with the unions, who has the backing of those independent committees or those independent expenditures that other organizations will add to their particular campaign to support them, or to, in this case, probably, I could see a candidate going out and, talking about what they want to do, and then having their independent expenditure committee come in and, whack the hell out of whoever's, one of the people running against them that they think is going to draw the votes away from. So, that's the key part of it, because it is California, is who's able to either write a check, like in the case of Tom Steyer, or who's able to raise the money, like in the case of the mayor in San Jose with his friends in Silicon Valley. Those are going to be the things to see, who's got that kind of heavyweight.
Well, and one of the things that this is a very different election, and you've got everyone kind of really bunched up, and no one. I mean, you've got Steve Hilton, and for full disclosure, I work with Steve. I did the communications work with Steve Hilton, but you've got him at times at 17%, at 20%, and everyone else is like maybe 17% or 16%, and then it just goes from there. And so, unlike it's been a very long time. You had Gray Davis when he ran. It was going to be Gray Davis. When Jerry Brown ran, it was going to be Jerry Brown. Same thing with Schwarzenegger, right? When he ran for re-election, it was going to be Schwarzenegger. It was going to be a very tough time. It was going to be impossible or very difficult to try to knock him out. Same thing when Jerry Brown ran. Very difficult to knock him out. Then when Gavin Newsom ran, same thing. Going to be very difficult to knock him out. And so people tried, but the thing is that it was a coronation before. Right now, it just seems it's all open. And so there is no real leader of the pack, especially on the Democratic Party side, to take this. And so that is where I think you've got all 8 that have said, man, we're all within 2 to 3 percentage points of one another. Anything can change. And so we saw with Katie Porter, she had a meltdown, video surfaced of having a meltdown with one of her staffers, and then a meltdown with the reporter. And she was in the lead for a long time. And now she's like in 3rd or 4th position. And so any of the little changes, you see Tom Steyer, who has so far spent more than $40 million in ads, and he was at about 2 to 3%, and now he's making his gains up, on the polling, but everyone is still within 2 to 3 percentage points. And so that is where I see this being a unique situation. The other thing that makes this unique is the unions are split between all these different candidates. You've got, yeah, it is. And so the spending that would come from them, that money is going to get splintered off. You've got Matt Mahan, who is the mayor of San Jose, and he initially got a good infusion of Silicon Valley money. There was, I want to say, within a couple of days, he had raised like $6 million, and then there was kind of an independent expenditure created for him by some venture capitalists and tech firms. But he's kind of fizzled out a bit. And so, you hear him speak, you hear him provide some of his platform, and then you've got all the other Dems who are just beating the hell out of him, saying, he talks about homelessness, he talks about housing, but it's ridiculous still in San Jose. And so everyone's tearing each other down. And so what do you have? You have, once again, a group of 8 Democrats, 2 Republicans, major candidates, and everyone's still within the margin of error of one another.
That's a lot of fun.
Yes.
Who needs a state fair this year? You've got a Democrat primary. Oh man! But you're right. I mean, what's interesting is that none of them have a lane all to themselves. Usually, in a primary, especially a multi-candidate primary, you're looking for someone that has a lane all to themselves. That their basic focus is to get 90% of those people in that lane coming out to vote, and voting for their candidate, there's probably no one on the Democrat side that can claim a lane unto themselves. And so, money is going to be important. The ability to target is going to be important. And I think probably the other thing is going to be at some point in time, framing the message. Someone frames the message of, people that may be disgruntled or disappointed with the last 8 years that are going to vote for a Democrat. Do you want to continue on a certain path or not? And every little thing is going to make a difference, like you said. What's her name? Katie Porter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she blew up at a staff person on camera. Is that the end of the world? Most times it's not. I mean, but what it did is it reinforced a pre-existing image of her, and it took root. And things right now are so tight that one little thing can make a difference and show a result. So it's like you said, it's the beginning of March. This thing doesn't happen till June, the beginning of June. The TV and radio stations are going to get rich. The direct mail people are going to get richer. There's going to be it's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows because, and you mentioned the mayor of San Jose. It's a good example. Someone jumps into the race, they get an infusion of cash, and it's kind of like, they go out to a lead, but eventually the rest of the track catches up to them. And then like in Katie Porter's case, they're catching up and then they stumble and they drop back. There's going to be a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, the unique part about this is that people actually have a chance right now to stick it to these people and put them on the record for what they believe, what they're going to do, and hold them to it. And I said this in the beginning, and I don't say it facetiously. The thing you described before about this guy who is a child molester, convicted 3 consecutive life sentences, who is about to get released because California law now says that he's, for purposes of California law and being a criminal, he's now a senior citizen because he's over 50, and they're going to let him loose on the street, which was because of a Democrat-controlled legislature and a Democrat governor and a Democrat-appointed parole board. How do they react to stuff like that? How do they answer to stuff like that? Mm-hmm. Do they defend it? Do they explain it? Or do they denounce it? And those are the kinds of things that people need to put their feet to the fire to.
And it's interesting because you've got all these different. Right now, there's been several debates that have occurred. There's been one major televised debate. All the other ones have been, associations. Like we just had one. It was more of a forum. The California Realtors Association just had one this past week. There's agreement between the candidates on a variety of different issues because there's, first of all, so many of them. But the thing I find interesting is, unlike the Republicans, and for obvious reasons, no one really seems to be going after the governor and some of his policies. And so, when you raise this particular question, because the governor hasn't, put his thumb down, on the scale for one candidate or another, or 2 candidates over the rest of the pack, but they've all been a little, except for Barajas every once in a while will go hard on the issue of oil and domestic energy production and the cost of gasoline, but everyone else is pretty much touting the party line to not be too critical of the governor. But there's going to have to be a point in time where people separate themselves out, and
you're absolutely right.
And say, you know what, I've got to win this thing.
Yeah, I saw the one debate, I forget where it was, where they were all on stage, and the only person that I think was talking to the majority of Californians who are tired of paying for high energy prices, who are tired of paying for laws that hurt small business, that are tired of, laws that are getting passed that put the criminals before the victims, was Hilton. The rest of them were explaining or dodging or poo-pooing the record of the California legislature and the governor, and making excuses for it. And some of them were trying to kind of do the tack towards the middle and then Who's the superintendent, the school superintendent?
Tony Thurman.
Thurman, yeah. He was unabashedly left and progressive, which, I don't agree with him on, but I kind of appreciated the fact that he had, he was who he is. And so, but it was interesting because to your point, it was kid gloves time. Mm-hmm. Well, that was what I think last month. Yeah. As we get closer, it's going to be more and more interesting to see if someone is willing to take off the gloves and say, look, I'm a Democrat, but this is how I'm different than what we've had the last 4 years or the last 8 years.
The last 16 years of one party rule. And that's the thing is, it's the line has been good in the sense of you guys have been in charge for 16 years, and here's what we have. And so why vote for the same thing? And so that has been the differentiator. But the part that we're gonna probably start seeing, I would say right around April is, and especially in May, is you're going to have to get a break. They're going to have to break from the governor and some of his policies, mm-hmm. because if everyone remains kind of bunched up, they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of differentiate themselves, because there's a lot of people in California who are frustrated. They're seeing gas prices continue to rise, not because of what's happening in Iran. And I know the governor's doing everything he can to blame Trump on rising gas prices, but our gas prices are a fact because our refineries have been shut down by this governor. And so there is going to have to be a movement that you just can't go out and run for governor by blaming Trump or saying, hey, I'm going to fight against Trump. You're going to have to stand for something. And that something's going to be, how do we keep these type of monsters in prison? How do we, at the same time, lower our energy prices? How do we build more so that housing can be affordable again? And how do we continue to provide jobs here and not let these billionaires leave that end up funding 50% of our state revenue? There's going to have to be a change.
There's going to have to be some tough questions asked as well. And that's one of the things I would say, and I've said this is one of my mantras, has been, I don't think the California media holds a lot of these people's feet to the fire the way they should. And in terms of the positions they take, the results of those positions that they take, and pressing them on stuff. And, so that someone's going to have to stand up and say, yes, I'm a Democrat, but here's what I would do different. Because I think if you ask people, and I haven't seen any polling, do you think the state of California is on the right track or off on the wrong track? I would think it's you ask voters that question, it would be severely off on the wrong track. And as a result of that, you'll have some Democrats, like you said, Javier Becerra being one of them, for example, everything's Trump's fault. But I think people know better that not everything is Trump's fault. And so they're going to have to take some responsibility and show some distance between what's happened over the last 8 years and what they would do different It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Especially if you're sitting in Alabama and you don't have to pay for any of it. Have at it, guys.
Yeah. Well, Mike, let's leave it there. Yeah, let's leave it there and put an end to this, and then till we see each other again.
All right. Take care, everybody.